Today, we are going hunting for the imposter or imposters hiding in plain sight.
I think the definition of being skilled has definitely changed over time.
Everybody needs to be a jack of all trades.
Gen Z is not a bystander anymore. They are becoming the main character.
Gen Z is more aware now than ever.
We are viewing online platforms as our polling stations or as our therapist's waiting room.
We often think AI as a neutral assistant, but is it really neutral?
No, it's not neutral.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Chintan Speaks. I'm your host Pooja and today we are marking World Youth Skills Day with a conversation that couldn't be more timely. So if you have ever played the game Among Us, you will know the drill. Everyone is going about their task, looking perfectly normal until you realize there is someone in the room isn't quite they claim to be. That's the story we are unpacking today. How politics, platforms, and technology have quietly shaped the world around a generation no one expected to be paying this much attention to. That's Gen Zs. Except Gen Z is not a bystander anymore. They are becoming the main character, emerging as one of the largest voting banks, one of its most influential consumer group, and a generation that government, businesses, and technology platforms are increasingly trying to understand, engage, and influence. So today, we are going hunting for the imposter or imposters hiding in plain sight. So joining me today, we have Diksha, Unnati, and Anika, and these are CRF's Gen Zs. So thank you all for being here. So Diksha, to start off, when we talk about World Youth Skills Day, are we still talking about skills in the traditional sense, or has the definition of being skilled has changed totally?
I think the definition of being skilled has definitely changed over time. To what extent, we're not sure yet, but it has. There is definitely a shift because initially, in earlier times, we would look at it from like a purely vocational lens, but now because times have changed, and also initially because skills would mean that you would apply what you've studied in school or in college to your workplace or your jobs. But now that is not simply the situation anymore. Right now, because again, initially it was about how much information one can retain and how much one can remember, and also on how much time a task would take for a person to do. But now, because there's already so much information out there, it's so dense that it's not just a matter of how much information one needs to retain. It's also a matter of how much curation and filtration one does through that. So in that sense, it is about questioning. It is about being inquisitive about what you are consuming. So in that sense, this is definitely a different set of sort of a skill that did not exist before, classified as just a particular skill, but it is definitely becoming more important these days. So there is definitely a shift of from the traditional definition of a skill.
Yeah. So, Unnati, would you say that understanding technology, information, and even climate has now become a life skill rather than just a specialist knowledge?
I would say 100%. It's no more just an optional trivia knowledge of sorts. Of course, we cannot negate the fact that we still need specialists out there in each domain. But at the same time, we also cannot negate the fact that everybody needs to be a jack of all trade. That's what the times demand of us. If I were to break it down, I wouldn't say that everybody needs to know how to code or everybody needs to know how to be very, it's not that everybody needs a specific niche skill set. They need to be aware of their hyper rapidly changing surroundings on the go. And it's no more perceived as a nerdy thing either. It's basically adulting 101. It's like being able to read your paychecks. It's being able to decipher your electricity bill. It's that crucial at this point.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's the current scenario of sorts, where the generation which I belong to is like the character Maddie sitting and watching a play unfold in front of them. And while they're watching it, they're realizing midway that, oh, wait, is this play about us?
Great. So, I mean, if today's discussion is really about the skills young people need, then it also has to be about the world they are, stepping into. And no generation is shaping and being shaped by the world more than Gen Z. So everything we have heard that Gen Zs are political, apathetic. The recent election in different parts of world, I would say, seems to tell a different story. So do you think young people realize that how influential they have become?
Honestly, I think this apathy narrative has been drawn out for too long. I think Gen Z is more aware now than ever. I think beyond looking at just apathy, we should be looking at desensitization and radicalization, these two facets, because desensitization to begin with, there's so much overexposure and oversaturation of content online, especially when a sensitive topic gets picked up and it's presented as a meme or a reel. The seriousness it has gets ripped off, and it just becomes a content piece online or a laughing stock if it's presented as a meme. So it just takes away the seriousness from it. That's one aspect. So instead of apathy, I would say that there is just a lot of content and it's just hard to decipher what to believe in at this point. But it's not that the Gen Z are going out of their way to just not be informed. In fact, I think this generation is doing a lot of things to be and stay informed.
Right. Also, to add to that, I don't know to what extent are they realizing how influential they are in terms of politics or elections, but they are definitely influential. I mean, we can see it in the elections of New York, we can see it in the elections of Netherlands, and also closer to home, both in Bangladesh and in Nepal. The youth, the Gen Z, have played a very significant role in the political turmoil of both of these countries. And beyond that, even just if we talk beyond just politics, even when we talk about, say, in terms of just society or through an environmental lens, there are certain, it's out there that there are certain ambassadors, celebrity ambassadors for environment, but there are certain things that they say that are not exactly reflective of the kind of work that they're supposed to do. And the youth and the Gen Z have picked up on that. They do talk about it. They do put it out there that, they're not okay with what is the way that a certain aspect of environment is being talked about by a particular ambassador. So they are aware.
So Unnati, do you think it has gone beyond the entertainment as well?
Oh, of course, way beyond that. At this point, it has become our newsroom of sorts, where we are viewing online platforms as our polling stations or as our therapist's waiting room, or governments are even using it as their press outlet. When we see PIB fact checks come up on our social media platforms instead of just sticking to the traditional print media. So, of course, we have gone way beyond that. And the whole narrative of social media being just for fun sort of, in my personal opinion, diminished the minute we found out how comment sections or Discord servers were deciding the future of countries out there. I mean, it were these movements that sort of led us to a point where we get to see headlines like the Dutch people having their youngest ever prime minister of sorts. So I would definitely say we have gone way beyond and further away from just for fun narrative around social media now.
Absolutely. So we have spoken about who is trying to influence youth, but there is another question worth asking is, how does that influence actually happen? So increasingly, I know the answer lies in artificial intelligence, and the algorithms quietly appears on our screen. But we often think AI as a neutral assistant, but is it really neutral, or does it just amplify the information and viewpoints we are already exposed to?
If I were to put it in a manner, I would say no, it's not neutral. It just poses as one, sort of wearing a jersey of a referee. In fact, if I were to take a very recent example from the FIFA World Cup itself, the recent match between Argentina and Egypt, that has left the world divided to say, because of what? A VAR system. VAR system is simply a tool that just shows what actually went down on the field. It just replays it in slow motion. It just replays it in slow motion for us to interpret, for us to decipher, and for us to come to our own conclusion. And right now, that conclusion has left us so divided. It reminds me of back in the day when we had that whole blue and black dress debate altogether. It sort of, in a nutshell, brings what I'm trying to say about AI. AI too is just a technological tool. What it is showing, it may not be false necessarily, but it is no impartial Ruth Bader Ginsburg out there either. It is, at the end of the day, just putting information out there, and the interpretations around it, the agreements and the disagreements around it, is fully on us, the users.
Right, and I agree with what Unnati is saying. Just to add to that, generative AI is already those models are built on existing information out there, that is on social media, on the internet in general. So it sort of incorporates our historical inaccuracies, it incorporates our own biases and our own prejudices, and also our own political viewpoints. So incorporates all of this. Of course, it's not going to become properly neutral in that sense, because it involves a lot of perspectives of different humans, and I mean that is the basis for the answers that any AI model that is given to us. Also, for example, there was a study done, I think, back in 2022 or 23. This was with an earlier model of ChatGPT, where a user had given a prompt asking for the top 10 historical philosophers. So the response given was a list of 10 male Eurocentric thinkers. And then the user again asked, why are the thinkers of other races left out? And then it corrected itself and gave out answers including other races. Then women were left out. So then it again asked, why are women thinkers not included in this? So you can see that it's the basis of all of this is already is what exists out there on the internet itself. Because again, if there is a larger conversation going around on a more of a Eurocentric perspective, so that is automatically coming down to our AI responses. So yeah, I don't think it's neutral only because of the actual social media, or the internet is of course not neutral itself. That's why.
That's actually such an interesting point that she gives an example of someone searching up these philosophers. Now, this person knew, right, that there are other philosophers, or they should Google like women philosophers or something like that. But every time you put a prompt, you don't exactly know what you're searching for, which means you can't always equip your knowledge.
Yeah.
And put
Sometimes
that
people just stop at one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
So where, most of the time people are not fact checking this, and which is why AI is just in a way stretching the majoritarian narrative, which is what is available online, right? Everything AI shows us is what's available online. So I think, we need to question more and be more, as she said, inquisitive towards AI.
Yeah, and in the same way, in that more information doesn't just produce more well-informed citizens. You just actually need to have proper perspective.
Exactly.
Have you ever felt guilty? I mean, if you give a prompt to ChatGPT, have you ever feel that, I have wasted this much water, or...
I feel like there was a conversation around this in the office the other day that you were mentioning about, right? Because see, we are aware of how much consumption goes into just one prompt, but that is upon us. Like these guys mentioned a few questions earlier, that we are inquisitive enough to actually bother ourselves to learn about this, to know about this. And I feel like that also goes to talk about what the youth right now is also sort of moving towards there. When we talk about skilling, it's not just like the hard skills or just the traditional sense of soft skills. It's also being informationally aware, if that's even a thing. Because there are so many new things that are coming around that nobody knew before. Like, who would have ever thought, like 10 years ago, that we would be facing this thing called AI, which is like, we just give it a prompt and it will create like a banana with a face. Like, who would ever thought of that? But that is what, right? These are the inquisitiveness, the ability to question what is ahead of us instead of just sitting around and just accepting it, is sort of, I believe, the transitional process at the moment. But what is ahead of us is, like, to me, it's like a black box yet to be explored, not just by my generation, but all generations at large. where all the generations have to play in tandem so that our future generations are also aware of what skills they need to harbor or harness to better tackle the world around them.
Absolutely. So, can technological innovation and climate goals genuinely move toward forward together, or are we reaching a point where difficult trade-offs are becoming inevitable day by day?
If I were to speak realistically, trade-offs are already happening, right? We're just not calling them that out loud, I would say. Like we were just talking about it, like nobody's officially choosing AI over their climate goals. Nobody's really doing that in a hyper-aware sense. But it's all happening quietly behind the scenes with whatever kind of technology that is getting deployed for the advent of newer technology to come out. So it's not also that the two cannot coexist. But it's also not for it to sort it out itself. It's for people to be actively involved in this equation to balance it out.
So, what does a responsible AI development look like from a sustainability perspective?
Right. I mean, as both of them mentioned, AI is so integral to us that now we have to find a way to, like you said, make it more sustainable and make it feasible in a way that it fits with our future sustainable development goals, right? There was this, I was talking to my friend and she mentioned this YouTuber, Chloe Abraham, who's like a technological positivist influencer. And she was talking about some research that happened recently where they were testing these lab grown diamonds that were completely pure and they were really good conductors of heat, which could also act as coolants. So, there's so much research going on to completely actually replace water. And even apart from that, there are closed loop cooling systems that people around in India only are working on, where you don't have to actually use new water with every usage, but you can recycle that same water. So I think that work is still going on. It's at a nascent stage and it's still a little bit costly. But we have to envision a future where we can see both AI and sustainability come together.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in many ways, this conversation brings us to the full circle. So, because, this discussion is not about AI or climate. It's about how we prepare youth for a rapidly changing world. So, after everything we have discussed today, what would you say are the most important skills for youth? Those skills that they should develop for a future.
I think that's how I began, but I think that is the most important skill that the youth have begun to acquire and should be continuing with it, is just to be able to question everything that they are coming across, because there is so much information. There's vast amounts of information and there's not enough perspective. So there's definitely a need for the youth to question, to have that perspective, to be inquisitive, and just to be able to connect certain things that don't seem really connected. So just the way that at this point of time, neither AI nor even climate change, none of these things can be seen in isolation. So for example, if someone, like we've discussed, if someone is generating something using AI, is giving it a prompt, somewhere, maybe if not now, but at some point, there has to be a thought that needs to occur for them, that this is the consequences of the actions that they are doing. So that has to come into play. So these are the certain skills.
I mean, it's sort of the question of the hour, right? Like, if we knew it, we wouldn't be struggling at the moment. But no, if I were to truly retrospect and ponder on it, I would say a lot of it depends on the generation, like my generation, working along with the generation before them and the generation that's about to come after them. Because if they're not working in tandem, there's, like I mentioned, there's so many new things out there that nobody before us knew about it, and people after us will only know about it if we are there to tell it to them, right? So with the rapid advancement in technology and the kind of resources that goes behind it, because in AI also, like we were talking about, since it's very topical, it's not just water as a resource that's going in it, right? It's like power grids, it's land resource, there's so many other things that are coming at play which we need to be aware of. And this awareness in itself is a skill that I would say the youth needs to develop a bone for. But Yeah, I mean, when we're talking, like we started in the initial bit, that it's not about learning how to code or memorizing each and every climate stat out there. It's more about learning to ask, like, who is it out there who's benefiting if I don't ask this question of sorts, if I were to put it quite plainly.
Yeah, I mean, every time there is a technological revolution or something that's new that comes up, there's resistance, there's pushback, or there's just uncertainty for the future. And I think all of us share it because we're all so uncertain as to what the future will hold, because AI isn't fully even developed right now. It's only been what, 4 years, 3-4 years that it's been so integral to our usage. So I think but as the numbers, even reliable data tells us that I don't think that there is as much job reduction as we are seeing. I know it seems very grim and the news portrays it as very grim, but reliable data tells us that there's automation has led to a task redesign, but it hasn't necessarily led to a headcount reduction. So I think what we need to do now is to upskill in a way to adapt to this new way, right? Like us, we need to work in a way, and Gen Z needs to adapt in a way that we fit into this current narrative. And I think apart from just upskilling, environmental consciousness is also something that's so important, right? Mission Life is an action plan that the government launched, which is basically about instilling sustainable behavior in the youth especially, but they had targeted, urban local bodies and rural villages. And the point was basically they had 7 goals, and they had instructions and guidelines as to how to follow it. And the interesting hook here was that it was based on Indian knowledge systems, right? It was taken from our history, and not just like religious history or textual history, but also actual
Lived histories.
Yeah, lived histories, exactly. In our subcontinent. So all of these things that were like asked to incorporate were so rooted and inherent to our tradition that it didn't seem like it's coming out of nowhere, right? It's not like a mandate that's thrown at us. It seemed more inherent to us and more easy to adapt to. And apart, like for the youth and how they've targeted that through this is there's an eco clubs subsection in this where schools and colleges can register. I don't know if your colleges have it. My college does have an eco club where they're connected to the Mission Life movement, and they can have their own events, and there's guidelines every year, and there's grants and fundings that are also given. So yeah, I think upskilling and just environmental consciousness on a personal level and sustainable behavior, all of it come together. I think we can see a future where AI and sustainability can go together.
Good conversation, and I mean, the skills you guys have shown are good. So, as we wrap up today's conversation, perhaps the biggest takeaway is that the future is not being shaped by a force alone. Politics, technology, artificial intelligence, and climate are all deeply interconnected. And understanding those connections is becoming a skill in itself. So maybe the twist in this whole story is not that there is no one imposter. There are several hiding behind different masks. One, platform trying to be neutral, one feed convincing us that we are seeing the whole story, and AI that often feels invisible, clean, and costless. The encouraging part, however, is that the very generation once dismissed as distracted or disengaged is increasingly asking the right questions, challenging these systems and demanding greater accountability. So on this World Youth Skills Day, perhaps that's the most important skill. Not just learning how to use technology, but learning to question it, understand it, and shape it responsibly. Thank you so much for joining us and for our guest for unpacking these ideas for us with today. And thank you everyone for listening to us. Until next time, keep asking questions, stay curious, and remember, you never quite know who's the imposter among us.